Our next panel this morning will focus on the current landscape of research on written communications and on human-centered design. Sort of a little different approach than perhaps we started with this morning, also needed in the area of health literacy and communication. Our first speaker is Will Shrank. Actually, I know Dr. Shrank for a long period of time in a variety of different settings. Welcome back. Dr. Shrank recently joined the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center's Health Plan Division as Chief Medical Officer. Before that, Will was Senior Vice President, Chief Scientific Officer, and Chief Medical Officer of Provider Innovations at CVS Health. Following Dr. Shrank will be Irene Chan and Elizabeth Walther of the Food and Drug Administration. Dr. Chan is a pharmacist who currently serves as Deputy Director in the Division of Medication Error Prevention and Analysis. Dr. Walther is also a pharmacist and serves as a health science policy analyst in the Division of Medical Policy Programs in the Office of Medical Policy. And finally, we will hear from Ed Israelsky. Dr. Israelsky is a consultant and recently retired Director of Human Factors at AbbVie, a biopharmaceutical company. As such, he led efforts to embed best practice human factors, engineering design methods into all of AbbVie's products to ensure safety and usability. After the panelists have spoken, there will be a discussion period, so it will be helpful if you just hold your questions and comments until then, and we'll have adequate time for a Q&A. Dr. Shrank, let's begin.
Well, thanks, Bernie. It's great to be here, and it's great to see a bunch of old friends who I've had the good fortune to work with for, over the last decade or more. I believe I was asked to speak to give sort of a different kind of perspective on this topic around health literacy, improving the way patients understand and appropriately take their medications, in part because I've largely had a difficult time holding down a job. And I have, over the last sort of number of years, worked in a variety of different settings that have offered me sort of a variety of different perspectives, different lenses to apply to this very, very difficult challenge of better communicating with our patients around their medications and encouraging them to better adhere to and safely administer their treatment. I was wondering why people were so interested in me. I'm going to carry around the Bernie Rossoff ID wherever I go. So, where was I? So there is I actually just lost my train of thought. There are a lot of different perspectives. Exactly, there are a lot of different perspectives. So it's interesting to think about considering that these sort of widely varying approaches to improve the way we educate patients and we engage patients and encourage them to use their meds better. It's really sort of critical to take a step back and think about all of the different parts, the pieces, the active members in the marketplace, how they interact with each other, how they interact with research, the extent to which they contribute to the research, the extent to which their research contributes to others' knowledge is really sort of at the core of us understanding what this current landscape really looks like. And I'd say that, 15 years ago, I was starting my fellowship, and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do my research on. And there's a process that you start your fellowship, and you start reading a lot of stuff, and you try to figure out what's really interesting. And the really compelling, interesting new topic that everyone was talking about was health literacy, something that had really just been defined for the first time. And I'm looking at Terry Davis and Ruth Parker, who played such an enormous role in those definitions and in creating sort of a field, the field of health literacy. And when you think about where that, where the discussion was then and where the discussion is today, it's pretty extraordinary, the amount of progress and change and, to some extent, a lack of coordination, but also an extraordinary amount of innovation. And I look forward to kind of walking through that with you all. So first of all, it's really important to look at the issue of health literacy and communication around meds through the lens of, or within the context of a rapidly changing healthcare landscape. Providers are fundamentally changing the way they're being rewarded for how they deliver care. And there's an overwhelming move, I know it sounds cliche, from volume to value, but it has really very specific implications for providers. As providers are taking more and more risk for the care of the patients they serve, it means they now have to care what happens to patients between visits to the doctor in ways that they never did before. It means they need better data about what happens to patients between visits to the doctor. It means they need to be able to better communicate with and engage and understand what's happening to patients between those visits to the doctor. It means that these measures that some of us have been doing research on for a long time are suddenly, they're front and center in every primary care doctor's office about how their patients are taking their meds. And it's a fundamental change, one that creates a unique business context for a whole host of players in the industry to participate. Whether it's pharmacies that are increasingly partnering with health systems to try to support patients between visits to the doctor, whether it's the pharmacy benefits managers creating better infrastructure and data. There's there's maybe 7 billion little startups that are trying to fit in and figure out the sort of what niche they can play and support providers. The landscape has changed, and there's an enormous amount of attention and growth and interest in understanding just what can happen to better communicate, understand, talk to, support patients around their medication use. I think the other key and critical trend is around consumerism in healthcare. So at the same time that providers are taking risk, employers are putting more and more of the cost responsibility on their patients. Patients, the high deductible health plan is sort of the norm now. And patients now are choosing with their feet. They're educating themselves in ways that they never did before. They're seeking information about price, but more importantly, they're differentiating the services that are out there. They're looking for services where they learn more, where they understand what they're taking, where they feel like they're cared for, where they feel like there's a system to help them manage their complex life and the very challenging sort of attributes to taking complex medication regimens. Consumers now, more than ever, are playing a very active role in guiding where they get their care. And that means that anyone who cares about whether that consumer gets their care at their site or through their service, sure as heck had better figure out how to communicate with that consumer. So you've got sort of a couple different key meta trends that are all kind of coming together here to say we have to communicate better. We have to deliver better information. We have to help simplify for patients. We have to help patients understand. We have to help remind patients when they're dealing with complex issues. We have to create an infrastructure to help support and communicate patients around their medication use. So what's happening right now in the marketplace? There is more investment in this area than I think I ever could have imagined. So my previous job was at CVS Health, and CVS Health obviously is a big retail company that has a reputation for working with consumers and focusing on consumers. But the amount of resources that a place like CVS allocates to rapidly understanding what words work, what messages work, what vehicle works, how should messages be delivered, and create with a remarkably deep bench of analytics to assess rapidly what's working, what's not working, to do at any given time dozens of small tests, constantly studying how to do better, how to get the right intervention to the right person, creating predictive models to leverage the data from previous tests to be even more efficient moving forward. These investments are really driving the way CVS communicates with patients. The words they choose, the channels that they leverage, the way in which they're continually trying to improve. I would say that that's, CVS is a very large company, but now in an environment where I'm at UPMC and where we work with our providers, our risk-bearing providers, we're a health plan, it's the same level of energy, if not quite the same level of investment, where we are investing enormously in figuring out how to better communicate with our patients. We have a really rich, robust consumer innovation arm where we've acquired probably a dozen companies specifically to help us use different kinds of technology, different kinds of data to better target and deliver the right intervention to the right patient around their medications or around their chronic disease management. The investment is substantial. We certainly have well over 100 people at the health plan working on this. And again, the focus is not to publish today. The focus is around learning internally, continually improving, and running the business as well as we can. But with a very deep and profound commitment to understanding how we communicate with our patients best to deliver the very best care we can. And employers that are focusing on wellness are doing a lot of the same things. Frankly, there's an environment now where patients are getting kind of bombarded in some cases. A patient with diabetes and heart failure might be getting calls from a lot of different sources. But when you think about it sort of as a whole, the investment in research here is enormous, but it's a little r research. And there's not sort of a coherent, collaborative, linear way to get learning from CVS to learning to Walgreens, to get learning to Walmart, to get learning to Mayo Clinic, to get learning to partners. And ultimately, there's a lot of inefficiency here, right? We're all studying a lot of these same questions. We're approaching them in a lot of the same ways. We're leveraging a lot of the same analytics. And we all could move a lot faster. A rising tide would lift all ships here if we were able to sort of garner and sort of bring together all of these efforts, all of these resources, all of this speed, all of this business urgency to create learning that we all could benefit from. That said, I would argue, and I have argued, and I will continue to argue, that sharing learning and publishing the results of that kind of work actually there is a good business case for doing so, and that it does allow you to differentiate yourself from your competitors. It does allow you to sort of make a very clear value-driven, mission-driven argument around what you're trying to do to help support your members or your patients or your customers. The other thing that's important to realize is that the tools are changing rapidly. I remember, talking to Mike Wolf, who's here, Ruth, Terry, 15 years ago, about medication labels. And medication labels are really, really important. But I thought that was the only way we could talk to patients about their medications. And now you look at how many different ways patients are interacting around their to improve their medication use. And some are higher tech, some are lower tech. There's a lot of online resources. There's a lot of texting that happens where there's telephonic that can be automated or a warm person, the use of apps, the use of telemedicine. I'm certain there's a lot more. But it really speaks to the fact that, it's not sort of the kinds of questions that we're asking and the kinds of interventions that we can apply are expanding rapidly. And to conduct the right kind of research, it would be short-sighted to focus on any given one of these. So just to sort of take that to the next level, not only are there a lot of tools and a lot of vehicles for sharing information, the messages that are being shared can vary in so many different ways, right? You can be focused on education, you can be focused on risk. At the same time, you could be using behavioral economics techniques to try to encourage and motivate somebody. You could be using social networks that was recently discussed and have social context encourage patients to take their medications better or differently. We can try to motivate patients. And when you start thinking about layering on all of these tools with all of these tactics, the number of permutations is really quite enormous. And that's where it really speaks to the fact that if we're going to do this right, we have to really be thoughtful about not just saying this one works or this one doesn't work, but this one works for this person, and this is the right intervention for this person. And ultimately, the sort of the next phase is going to be not just figuring out is an intervention effective or not, but how does it compare to all the other sets of interventions? How do you create a cohesive, coordinated approach to bring the right intervention to the right person, but not to be wasteful, not to send too many interventions to any given person? How do you build the right system, a comprehensive, thoughtful system that can really help patients better take their meds? And I think back to one of the first health literacy papers I worked on, and I don't know, maybe 10 years ago. And I did a systematic review of the articles that were related to easier readability or understanding to make labels easier to read and understand. And I looked at 2,000 articles, and I read them all very carefully. And I wrote the paper, and then I rewrote the paper, and then I rewrote the paper again. Sent it to, I think, somewhere between 5,000 and 3,000 journals before it got accepted. Years later, it got accepted. And found some, modestly interesting findings about characteristics of written information that do help make labels easier to read and understand. But frankly, I look at that work and it feels like it's so outdated, right? It doesn't feel like that kind of work. It's almost impossible for that to make to contribute to the really, really difficult, complex challenges that we're working on today. So, this is really an effort to try to make the argument that there is a lot going on. The environment is changing faster than any of us could imagine, regardless of who the next president is. Well, I don't know how to say this. Even in the setting of a new next president, this movement to value is not going to go away. This is here to stay. It's hardwired into sort of how the government pays for care, how commercial payers are paying for care. It's increasingly being adopted by providers as their mission to deliver better care at lower cost. The landscape has changed, will continue to change for good. And as a result, this whole level of investment is only going to get bigger and stronger. It's not realistic for us to think that something magical is going to happen in the business sector where the research is suddenly going to get better. They're going to be more rigorous. But the folks in this room and the folks in this room's contacts and the folks in this room who have been so influential over the years around moving this agenda for health literacy research forward can play a really substantial role here in really refining and reforming and encouraging researchers to play a different kind of role in the marketplace, to embed themselves in a company or to partner deeply with a company that has scale, that has the ability to test and expand, that has the resources, that can do things quickly, and that do it, that kind of embedded approach, I think, is what we need. That'll allow us to sort of take into account all of the nuances, all of the different levers, all of the different approaches. I would also say, I'll make a little plug for my friend Mike Wolf in the back here, who I think did just this when it comes to the UMS label. He did some preliminary work with Ruth Parker and Terry Davis, and to a smaller extent myself, and came up with some sort of foundational information that was valuable, but then went and worked very, very closely with folks in the marketplace. And not just one, but a variety of them. And it's been extraordinary to see the growth and the sort of the pickup and the energy around that new label. That is, I'm certain, an improvement. But the thing that's most impressive to me is not just that it's an improvement, but it's been able to. You've worked with the right folks in the right kinds of settings in an embedded kind of environment to allow you to really scale. So I'll just finish with. And if we're thinking about how to fund health literacy research, I would encourage us to think about embeddedness as a key criteria, and that as sort of sub-criteria, a requirement for speed, scalability, sustainability, this ability to sort of target patients within populations so we get the right intervention for the right person. And then a flexibility of design so that it's not a rigid study, but an opportunity to learn in real time. And I'm getting the hook. Thank you very much. And do we have time for questions, or should I move on? Great. Thank you.